Okay, now we've made it to the instructions. Let's dive right in. We're going to refer to our classic brownie recipe again. Just FYI, this entire recipe is in the transcript and in the description box. So, let's go through these. First thing to note is that these steps are in order for a reason. Respect the order and follow it as closely as possible. For example, this recipe asks you to center a rack in the oven and preheat the oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't center that rack first, you'll end up having to finagle a 325-degree oven rack, which can be dangerous. This goes for ingredients too. These can drastically impact texture and sometimes even the taste if done out of order. For example, if we decided to add all of our eggs to the chocolate mixture at once, instead of one at a time, it's likely that our eggs would scramble from the high heat of the chocolate mixture. Cold eggs plus hot chocolate equals bad brownies. Adding them one at a time is a process called tempering, which brings only some of the eggs and the chocolate together to get them at a similar temperature before adding all of the eggs. This ensures that one item doesn't overheat or overcool the other. Now, the recipe won't always say this explicitly, but just know, if the instructions are written in a particular way, it's best to follow them to the letter. The recipe is trying to help and guide you without overloading you with a bunch of unnecessary information. So just put your faith in the recipe. It will guide you to the end result. Okay, next, take a look at the quantities. How many brownies will this make? We can see from the recipe's instructions that it makes around 16 brownies. If you want more, double the recipe. Less, cut it in half or even a third. To do this, you can either use an online tool. Some recipes even have this built in if you get it online. Or you can usually just do this by hand. If you do it by hand, I suggest rewriting this recipe to match your specified quantities before starting your recipe. For example, if we want to cut this recipe in half, our ingredients will look like this. Note that for our flour, I cut the 1/3 cup in half to equal 2 tablespoons and 2 teaspoons of all-purpose flour. This is about half of 1/3 a cup and is much easier to accurately measure with the standard measuring tools than trying to figure out how to half a 1/3 cup. For more helpful conversions, check out Taste of Home's lesson on how to cut down recipes. After, note the tools. So far, just in the first step, we can see that we need an 8-inch baking pan, tinfoil, heatproof bowl, and a saucepan. In the next, a spatula or a tool with a flat, flexible blade. And finally, a thin knife and a cooling rack. Sometimes a recipe will list out these tools, and sometimes they won't. So, much like we did for our ingredients, it's a good idea to pull all of these items out of your cupboards before you begin to make sure that you have everything. Finally, make sure you understand what is being asked. In our next unit, we'll be covering some common terminology, so we'll touch on this in just a bit. But the main point here is just to note any words that you don't understand and look them up before you start. For example, the instruction: line an 8-inch square baking pan with foil. Butter the foil and set aside. Now, not everyone knows what all of these terms mean, specifically to line a pan and to butter the foil. In this case, lining means to cover the inside of a dish completely with foil, parchment, or whatever liner is listed. In our case, foil. Buttering means to liberally coat the surface with butter. This is the same for oiling. The point is to apply fat to the surface of the liner to avoid sticking later on. For butter, I suggest using cold or room temperature butter and rubbing it along the pan with either a paper towel or just your hands. The layers should be visible but not too thick. This isn't meant to alter the taste, it's just to stop the brownies from sticking. According to our ingredients, this butter is not included in our 5 tablespoons. It is additional, so account for the fact that you'll need about a tablespoon more depending on the size of the pan you're using. When in doubt, check online. If you have a question, it's probably been asked before, especially when you're using recipes from the internet. Check the comment section if you're on a blog, or leave a comment to the person who wrote a recipe to ask them directly. Also, use online resources like Food 52 Hotline, Food Network, and Chowhound. Check for video content as well. It's becoming more and more popular for chefs to add video content alongside their recipes to show visual examples of how items should be prepared. You can also search for key terms in Google, like what is simmering or what is a scant 2 inches. Okay, so now we've read our recipe, we've read it again, got our ingredients and our tools. Now it's time to start cooking. Actually, we still have plenty of do before we get to that part, namely our mise en place.